Rinkside with Emma Miskew and Ryan Steeves.
Welcome to Rinkside, the first episode of our new podcast where we just get together and talk about all things youth sports, athletes, parents, coaches, I guess whatever's on our mind that day.
I love it. I'm so happy to be starting this podcast with you, Ryan. This is really exciting. Just a bit of background on myself first. So my name is Emma. I'm from Ottawa, born and raised. I am an Olympian in curling, a world champ. I've played other sports as well, so I have a little bit of insight on a whole bunch of little things, but curling is definitely my area of expertise, and I'm really excited to share it with you.
Emma just completely undersold herself. Emma's a world-class curler, part of one of the best teams in history. So you didn't give our listeners a fair background on yourself. Team Homan, key part of Team Homan. So sorry, I know it's your bio, but I'm injecting some reality to it. And so with that, on that note, I'm the other guy that you're listening to. We've got Emma. My name's Ryan Steeves. I've been playing hockey my whole life. I've played through the junior A level. I played the collegiate level at Yale University, and I was drafted and signed by the Colorado Avalanche. And so after my playing career, I did what most ex-hockey players do. I turned back to the rinks, and I'm fortunate to have two wonderful little boys and spend the majority of my time in a rink coaching them. And so with all that experience and with Emma's amazing experience, we hope to bring you some fun, informative, maybe even some helpful dialogue with our new podcast, Rinkside.
Well, love that. I think that leads us nicely into today's topic of parent coaching. And why do we care about that, Ryan?
Well, I am a parent coach, and I think more importantly, it's just one of those topics that always floats around rinks, ball diamonds. It's really present in our world because so many of our coaches are parent coaches. And so, yeah, it's going to be a great chat today. And, we're really fortunate to have Brendan Bell joining us. Brendan Bell had a great NHL career. He's a great figure in our community, and he just so happens to spend all of his days now in a rink coaching one of his three children, which we'll hear about. I want to welcome to Rinkside's first guest, Brendan Bell. Brendan, welcome to Rinkside with Emma and I here.
Thanks. Really looking forward to this.
I was a big fan of yours, Brendan, as you continued your career onto the NHL and in Europe, and played for the Leafs, Sens, Coyotes, Rangers, I think, to round it out. And now you've turned on to much bigger and better things, small scale rinks, coaching right now at least one of your three children, your daughter at the U13 level, the AA Wildcats, right?
Yeah.
As our listeners will know, this show is really about connecting people to discuss things that are really important to sports families, youth sports families, athletes, coaches, parents alike. And so we want to talk to you today in your latest expertise in life as a parent coach. Maybe you can tell us how long you've been coaching, Brendan?
Well, I've got three kids that are now 14, 12, and just about to be 10. And so I guess I started coaching when my oldest was 6 or 7 years old. So it's coming up on 10 years here now. I have never had any intentions of coaching. I kind of thought that, once I stopped playing, it was going to be, I'll just let somebody else handle it. I've tied my skates for long enough. I don't need to be on the ice 6 or 7 nights a week. And very quickly, like within 1 or 2 ice sessions with, the kids in IP and skating around with the buckets and that kind of thing, I realized that, this is going to be fun. And I can hopefully make a bit of an impact on some kids here and, take some of the lessons that I learned over a long playing career and a long life in hockey and try to transfer some of that. So yeah, it's coming up on, I guess, 8 or 9 years. And I've rotated through all three of my kids in different age groups. And so had some experience now. This is my second year coaching U13 AA, coach U11 AA, going to go back to do that next year, hopefully, if the association will have me back. Going through that coach selection process right now and re-interviewing with all the same people. But it's been a blast. And as much as, I like to work with the kids and try to impact, not just their athletic growth and development, it's really about the kids and watching them grow and teaching them life skills as much as it is about athletic development. So, I think this has been as or more rewarding for me than it has been for the kids.
That's awesome. Do you find, since you've been doing this since they were younger, this age group of U13 is more challenging than when they were a bit younger. Because I remember when I was 13 and I feel like I wasn't that coachable. So I'm curious how these girls are on your team.
Well, let's talk about girls and boys because I did U13 boys last year, and it was more of a challenge than I had anticipated at the start of the year. And there's hormones and puberty and maturity and lots of things happening in kids at that age, and you never know what you're going to get. And so, from the start of the season in August to November, it was a bit of a bumpy ride, and we just had a frank and honest discussion with the players and with the parents, and individually and as a group. But after that, it was extremely rewarding. And again, that's why I talk about athletic development versus development as a child and as a person. That's where I find the rewards and the benefits of giving back and volunteering and coaching. I find it so much more rewarding because not all these kids are going to grow up to be athletes and make careers in sports, and they might not even play next year. Who knows? But there's life lessons associated with sport, and there's a chance to make a real difference in a lot of lives. So that was the boys' experience. The girls' experience this year has been awesome. I've got a group of 17 kids that are super attentive, willing to learn, high achievers, both on and off ice. And it's just been like that. That's the other part about coaching is you never know what you're going to get as far as a group. You've got 17 different personalities, and you're trying to get them to become one solid group and to improve as a whole, but also to improve as individuals. So yeah, I'd say that's probably my favorite part about coaching is trying to get all those personalities working in one direction.
Let's go back to when you decided to start, because I had a very similar, I think, reaction when my sons got into it. I spent so much time in hockey, I'm going to back off, right, and let somebody else do this. So I'd like to know two things from your perspective. When you jumped in, did you have any of the issues that maybe you've seen at the U13 level as a parent coach? Because it is different being a parent coach. You've talked about coaching, a broader team, but you haven't talked about coaching your son or your daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Were the issues the same when you started in, IP versus U13 as a parent coach?
I mean, you'll know this, right? Because you've had this experience that you see things around the rink, or you hear things about other parents or about other coaches and kind of horror stories about minor hockey and minor sports, really. But minor hockey is where we spend most of our time. And what I did very early on was nip that in the bud. Like, just, this is not the most important thing in the world. These kids are 7 and 8 years old. They're so far away from being what you expect them to be. There's going to be so much that changes over the next 3 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, that let's keep this in perspective here.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of take the crazy out of it, and you don't allow that to fester when they're young. And, as that has evolved and as time has gone on, you see that natural change. You see that progression where, the kid who was the superstar at 7 years old can't quite do the things that he used to do now at 13. And, that parent quiets down a little bit, or they pipe up a little bit because it's the coach's fault. And it's, and just things are going to happen. There's a lot that happens in a child's development, let alone an athlete's development. So it's, you have to keep that perspective is, first, it's not the be all and end all. Like, this is youth sports. Like, so much is going to change month over month, year over year. That if you just keep doing the right things and keep the right perspective, things are going to fall the way that they do.
How do you work on maintaining a very unbiased coaching approach? Because I've been coached by teammates' parents in not only curling, which obviously is a majority of my life, but in soccer as well. I played soccer when I was younger for many years. And I always found that the bias was there. I could tell at any age that there was a bias there. And it wasn't always a really bad thing, but I could tell that it was there. So how do you manage that?
It's something I'm extremely cognizant of. And, like, I tell my kids, specifically my 3 at the start of the year, and I've told them since they were little that, like, I'm not coaching you, I'm coaching 16 other kids on the team. And it just so happens that, I'm your dad first and I'm your coach second. And, unfortunately, you get to have your dad in the dressing room and you get to have your dad on the bench and on the ice during practices and that. But there's, there could be a benefit to that, but there's also going to be a downside. If we take a too many men on the ice penalty, you're serving that penalty. If we take a bench minor, you're going to the box. You're not getting
Player of
the
the game.
3-1s.
Player of the game.
You're
Brad?
not getting a player of the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's not happening. I don't care how clear it is. It's not going to happen. I've had to have that discussion with my kids.
Yeah.
Like, you played great. If somebody else was coaching, you'd probably get the MVP or the player of the game or whatever it is. It's not going to happen with that in charge. And they get that now. At first, it was a little bit tough, but and honestly, frankly, like, I see that going forward over the next couple of years when things start to quote unquote matter a little bit more. I don't want to shortchange my kids, and that's something that I'll probably wrestle with a little bit. But I think that, again, the perspective has to be, you're coaching a team, and you're coaching not one child, you're coaching 17 of them, and they should all be treated equally. And don't ever put yourself in a position where there could be perceived favoritism or there could be perceived benefit construed to a coach's child.
Yeah. So Ren, I'm in the middle of this too, and this is the season for it now. Maybe it's been going on a little longer for girls hockey, but coach selection process. And when you spend enough time at a sports facility, I call it, not a rink, because it happens across all sports, this notion that, my son or daughter finally gets to play with a non-parent coach. There's this notion that non-parents are the be all end all, and that parent coaches are, as Emma alluded to, right, just biased in it for themselves and their own child. Has that been the case in your experience? Is it easy to draw a line here and say, once my child can graduate away from these crazy parents, they're going to excel and everything, all these issues are going to go away? What's been your experience with that?
It's two-sided. My 3 children have never played for non-parent coaches. Just the way that it's gone with their age groups. We've been fortunate that we've had some great parent coaches in our associations. Mm-hmm. I have watched it very, very closely with families and kids that we've become close with over the years. And, that's something that gets mentioned in the rink, right? Is that, yep. or any other facility, that, well, it'll be different next year because it'll be a non-parent coach who's got no biases and doesn't know these kids and all of that. Sure. Let's see how that works out down the line, because inevitably, just as human beings, biases emerge. There's people you like more than other people. There's kids that you see that do the little things naturally that, like, all of a sudden a 6th forward on a hockey team is getting the benefits that they didn't get the year before. Well, coach sees something in that kid, and that's great. But what I will say, with selection for non-parent coaches, you never know what you're going to get. I'm involved with both associations that my daughters and my son play in, and there's not a lineup of super capable people who are top tier trained, like that are just, except I wish there was, but there's not people beating down the door to coach 13-year-old girls hockey or 14-year-old boys hockey. Like, there's only so many people. And so my position on it has always been, if you've got a parent who is capable and who, checks all the right boxes in terms of coaching traits and personality traits, frankly, more than coaching traits, but who can be fair and who can be unbiased, why would you not go with a parent? The parent, to me anyways, a parent cares about, and this is just my personal experience, I care about all of these kids. I don't just care about one. I care about 1 through 17 on this roster. I've watched them grow up. I've been a part of their lives in some way or another. I know these kids. I care about these kids. And to drop somebody else in who doesn't know these, and not to say that they don't care, because obviously they're giving up their time and they're volunteering as well for, you can say parent coaches are paid what? Paid peanuts. They're basically covering expenses, if that. And so if you've got someone who's capable and who's invested and who's got a history and a track record, why would you not do that?
Totally fair. And I think that part of when I was younger, that it was a little bit challenging is that I was on teams with friends. And so if their parent had to do some tough coaching for me or have difficult conversations, there would almost be a tension with my friend that was on the team. Have you found that's happened at all? Like, I'm sure that your kids have been friends with others on the team. They haven't just been teammates.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, like I think of it every time I can think of one kid last year on the team and one kid this year on our team that, I'm trying to push you. I'm trying to challenge you. And I know that you don't like this. And I know that you feel that I'm being hard on you. And I am being a little bit harder on you than I am on some of the other kids because I know what your capacity is and I know what you can do. And, that's a fine line to walk because when you're coming over for a sleepover tomorrow night, you don't like me very much right now, and I'm pretty soft really in general. And to your point, like I remember playing on teams growing up where I didn't like the coach and his kid was my friend. And then I don't know if I like my friend anymore as much as I did, and I'm mindful of that because that's not fair. It's not fair to my kids. But that's also part of the responsibility that you take on at the start of the year before a season starts that, there might be some uncomfortable conversations. There have been uncomfortable conversations with families, with kids that, I am genuinely trying to get the best out of you and trying to help you improve.
Well, that's why your players are lucky to have you, Brendan. I mean, first of all, there's the experience you bring, right? It was a no-brainer at IP when they were like, oh man, we've got Brendan Bell here that can take the reins. Do it. So I think you're doing a great job, and you've got some great perspectives. Maybe we'll get you out on this. If I think the idea here is we've got people driving to and from practices right now listening, and if you were to offer up 2 or 3 bite-sized tips for that parent coach that is on that bench or on the sideline, and just not paying attention to 2 or 3 things that they can improve on, just to not be that parent coach, what are they from your experience? What are those pitfalls?
I think there's a couple of things, and one is kind of check in with the players, and not pull them aside and how's your day and how's things going, but just like when kids are a little bit down or maybe not themselves or not pushing as hard or not smiling as much, and just kind of check in and just do a little thing, like I mentioned earlier, like a little back rub or a hug or a tap on the helmet every once in a while, like it goes a long way. And so check in on the kids because there is a responsibility, not just, I think anyways, like you're not a hockey coach. You're a teacher, you're somebody that can make a difference in their lives. Make sure it's fun. Like that's part of checking in is make sure they're having fun coming to the rink. Mm-hmm. And I know, Ryan, we've had conversations in the past where, you see that happen with kids where it becomes a job almost. Yeah. Like you're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. This isn't supposed to be a job. This isn't supposed to be hard. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to, and not every day is going to be fun, but you're supposed to enjoy coming to the rink. And whether that's, you've had a bad day at school, things are happening, family life, your parents are hard on you, whatever it is, try to make it fun. Try to make sure that those kids know they're in a safe space where they can enjoy being around their teammates, where they can get some exercise, have some fun, and leave the rink with a smile.
Very thankful for your time, Brendan. Your prize for being Rinkside's first guest is in the mail. No, we're lucky to have you on, Brendan. Brendan Bell, of course, just a great success story on the ice as a professional in our community, doing great things with your children and the players on your team. So thanks a lot for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, that was awesome. I really loved his insight on not only being a player in that situation, but also coaching his daughter. So that's great.
Yeah. Brendan's a pro. I've had a good, of course I knew him when we were 15 playing hockey, and I watched his career unfold, and it's really refreshing to see him now diving into coaching as a parent and dealing with all the things that come with that, and to see how successful he's been at it. I think it's really refreshing for people to hear the way it can be. It doesn't always have to be a certain way as a parent coach, and he seems to be just crushing it. So
yeah. Do you find the same thing when you're coaching your son in terms of bias? Like, do you find that you have to put a lot of attention into that and making sure that everyone else on the team feels comfortable?
Yeah, I think what stuck out from Brendan's words was extremely cognizant of it. I think to be a successful parent coach, and there's maybe listeners who will say, I don't think you are a successful parent coach at this, but I think to be a successful parent coach, you have to be extremely cognizant of it, to steal his words. Bias is lurking around every corner, at least the perception of it. And so you have to work really hard. If you're willing to do a great job at it and have your son or daughter just be viewed as a regular player, you have to work really hard at it. You can't do things towards your child that you wouldn't do towards anyone else. You can't discipline them harder. You can't praise them more vocally. You have to really pay attention to it. So I was happy to hear Brendan say that. And I think a lot of parent coaches can learn from that. And it's not easy. It does take effort, and you have to do things a little differently than you maybe would as a parent cheering in the stands.
There's something that came up in that conversation that I thought was interesting. It just kind of sparked a memory of mine, and that was the player of the game. And I think I'm just a little bit sensitive to it, having played sports for my whole life and then highlighting one person's contribution in a team game. I always thought, is this something that's going to help or hinder performance for the players that are maybe not in the running to win those? Are they the players that are going to end up quitting the sport because they think they'll never be the best at it? Playing on a team, a 4-person team like curling, where they sometimes give one player like player of the game or player of the tournament at the end of an event. And it's like, well, we all contribute to everyone's shots. Like everyone's involved in everyone's shots. And it's similar in hockey in that there are plays. Yeah. And if you don't get past the puck the right way, how are you going to put it in the net? So I always thought, is this helpful or more of a hindrance for performance? What do you think about that?
I think it's a real pitfall for teams, because you're right. And it's also what you value. How do you value one player's performance in a curling game? Is it just incredible shot? Well, what were the setups to that? How was the prep for that? So you're right. There's so much that goes into curling. In hockey too. What do you value? It's so easy to value a shutout or a 2-goal performance. Do you also value the defensive work that went into that shutout? Do you value the passing that went into those 2 goals? There's a lot of factors that go into it. And so I've completely removed it. It's out of the equation. I don't do it anymore. I refuse to, except for when these tournaments give you swag to hand out to players of the game, like a mini stick or a puck, which I absolutely hate. Inevitably, the person that gets the 2 goals never gets it. It's always some, obscure play that we caught, like a block shot, something that really values the things that aren't always valued. So we try to use it in that light. But, when it comes to parent coaching, this is another pitfall. You see it time and time again. Parent coaches awarding player of the game to their child. And I wrestle with this. This is a really unfortunate thing, because there are many times when your son or daughter actually earns it. I've had assistant coaches come to me after games and say, your son is getting it. There's no debating this. He was the best player. And I go, well, thanks for your input. But no, I may have done it once where I've allowed another coach to award it for a really super game, but it's a rarity. And it's one of those things. You've got to put in the work. You've got to have that conversation. Brendan said it, took the words out of my mouth. You've just got to have that conversation. And, what I've told my son, who I coach right now, is you will never wonder how you played with me. I will always be honest with you. You may not get a player of the game when you really deserve it. I know that sucks. That's part of the trade-off that we have here. But I'll tell you exactly whether you earned it or not. And, I just never wanted to expose your children to this concept that, well, you just got that because your dad's the coach. That's about the worst thing that could happen.
Player of the game situation. Like I haven't been on a hockey team where that's been something that could be awarded, but there are, in soccer, we didn't really do that, but in curling, there'll be, all-star awards that are strictly based on shooting percentage and not based on all your other jobs on the team, like sweeping, line calling, whether you're supporting and helping your teammates out. There's only 4 of us. So everything you do out there is super important. Right. If you're not talking or you're a little bit mad and you're not helping everyone else, like that's worse than missing a shot a lot of the time. So when those shooting percentages came up when I was younger, I was very sensitive to it. And I got consumed by it. I was like, well, what the public's going to see is that number. They're not going to see all the other things that I do, because all they do is highlight that statistic. And it took me a long time to battle with that and realize that my other jobs are equally if not more important than just that one shooting percentage. So I find that highlighting individuals on a team is, if it wasn't helpful for me as a child, I can't see that it would be helpful for every kid on the team, especially the ones that are probably not going to win player of the game, but are still so helpful on the team.
Yeah, you make one child happy and you make 15 unhappy in a bigger team sport. In a smaller team sport, it's the same concept. I guess my feedback, or I guess my response to Brendan was, for those parent coaches that do engage and decide to put their hands up and they get selected, the first pitfall for you is tryouts and sort outs, right? And whichever level it's at. People are watching you closely. They're watching. I'd say there's like 3 types of parent coaches. There's the parent coach that's coaching only to get their child at that level, right? And that's the worst kind, which I think falls on a lot of coach selection committees to make sure that's not happening. Then there's the coach that's coaching because their kid's a really high level player. So it's just obvious they would coach. And then there's the coach that's doing it because they fall sort of in the middle. There's no real motive for doing it other than they just love it. And I think that's actually the majority of parent coaches. As Brendan said, his children have only ever had parent coaches. And I think that's probably the case for many youth sports. It's really hard to find non-parent coaches that are willing to put in the time, that can feel as engaged and dedicated to a group that they have no, emotional or familial connection to. So yeah, the coach selection process is always the most precarious time where it rears its head. You're being watched more closely. You're being watched. And again, this is for all those parent coaches out there. You have to be cognizant of not taking the wrong people on the team. It's not only about your child, are there friends? Are you willing to make tough decisions to friends? And I think any coach, any parent coach who's done it for long enough will say those are the worst moments as a coach, when you have to make tough decisions. My son's come home from tryouts crying because, one of his good friends has been released by me. I couldn't be more evil to him at that moment. Did you go through any of those types of experiences with a parent? Or
I haven't, but when I was on my soccer team when I was younger, there was a situation actually where there were twins on the team and one made the team and one did not.
Okay.
That wasn't decided on by a parent, but that was a huge thing. And then they ended up allowing both to play because that would be impossible for the parents to figure out 2 different teams for their children that were the same age.
Right.
But I just did notice that there was definitely like a bias, and it was just it's really hard not to have a bias. There were parent coaches on my soccer teams, there were parent coaches in curling, and whether or not it was the parent trying their best to do the right thing and the child kind of giving attitude back, or whether it was kind of the parent either being overly hard on them or the other way around, where they weren't giving them any flack at all for things that they should have. For me, best case scenario was having a really invested non-parent coaching our team. But I know that's not always possible. These are volunteer positions a lot of the time. And someone whose child is on the team is going to want the best for the team and want to put the time in. And that's just not always an option for someone who doesn't have their child on the team.
Yeah, I always go back to a lot of this falls on the coach selection process. If the coach selection committee or whichever organization is doing it, they just really have to put in the time to not rule out parents and not artificially favor non-parents, because I've seen nightmares in both cases. So it really is about getting to the root of coaching philosophy, approaches, talking to references. I don't think they talk to people enough. Ask parents. And there's always going to be people that criticize both types of coaches, but it is the most important decision that's made at the minor youth sports level, is who are we going to put in charge of shaping these young people's minds and futures of sport and passion for sport. The biggest mistake you can say is, well, you're excluded because you're a parent, because there's a lot of, I'd say the vast majority of coaches out there are parents. There's a need for them, but it's just finding the right ones. And if there's not the right one, then a non-parent for sure can be that. But there's, as Brendan alluded to, you just can't care the same way about children if you don't have some connection to them. I don't care what you say. It's just impossible. But that doesn't mean that a non-parent isn't the right person for the job.
One more thing Brendan brought up in our discussion that I thought was just an interesting topic to continue was he mentioned like having to do some tough coaching with a particular player. And in that situation, he was saying could be a friend of his child. But I was thinking more of the coaching angle of the tough coaching versus like the positive, sort of negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement. And I think that every athlete and every kid reacts differently and should be almost coached a little bit differently. But what is your opinion on like positive reinforcement coaching versus negative reinforcement and highlighting mistakes.
Yeah, I don't think there's a coach out there that would say negative reinforcement, critical coaching is better. It certainly creeps in, and there's certainly times for it. But yeah, every child responds. You can just see their eyes light up when you tell them that they did something great. And then the criticism that may follow that, they probably don't even hear it because they're just so happy and feel good that they've been praised, right? And so that's a really tough thing to ignore when you're coaching young children. Sometimes you do get carried away, and you do coach them aggressively or with tough love, as Brendan said. Not always the back rub, but the critical coaching. So it's such an easy thing to say that you have to be positive, and kids respond well to positive coaching. Of course, that is what 99% of the time is done. But you're right. It's managing the negative feedback, because kids don't like to hear it, and they don't like to hear it from someone they really look up to.
I found I had some really good coaches at times that would come forward with explaining what to do next time and not saying what was done wrong. Like, next time, try to do it this way.
Right.
And then your mind goes to like, okay, this is going forward. I'm not thinking about the mistake I made in the past. And I thought that approach was, for me, it was like so helpful. And then, so I still, even on our team now, like, yeah, we're all adults, but we still try to help each other out there with positivity and saying what is going well or what we can do better, but going forward, and not saying like, that thing you did, that mistake you made, oh, we got to avoid that, because then you're thinking about the mistake and not what's next and how to fix it.
Yeah, I had a scenario recently. That was the first time it popped up where there was my child was involved in a called a dispute, for lack of a better term, but it was some senseless thing in a practice, and the other child felt wronged by my child. But that's not the way I saw it or the assistant coach saw it. So we sided with my son. In my mind, there was no difference. It didn't matter who the child was, but it was very important to the other child that it was my son, and that child felt like I was taking his side, and it didn't go well. This interaction, I was so shocked. It was so clear to me and to the assistant coach, but it was just another reminder for parent coaches to, I always go back to optics matter. Intent is almost irrelevant. People will insert their own intent watching you, and they do. They watch you closely as a parent coach. And so it just goes back to the start of the conversation we had with Brendan, which is you have to be extremely cognizant of it at all times, and that's not fair, but that's sort of the reality, that if you want to do it well and you don't want the fact that you're a parent to be the focus or an excuse or a rationale or a reason, then you just have to work hard at it. And that one was a good reminder, and it wasn't a negative coaching experience. As we're just talking about, it was more of a discipline, and sometimes you have to make decisions. That happened or it didn't, that was wrong or it wasn't. This is another reminder that optics really play into it. Well, Emma, it was that's a wrap on episode 1 of Rinkside. It was a real pleasure today going through all this with you. We were very fortunate to have Brendan Bell, someone who's doing just amazing things in our community, coaching in other areas, giving back, and following just an amazing NHL and professional hockey career. So it was really a pleasure to have him on today. And really fun just to chat about the issues around parent coaching with you today and hearing your insights. Can't wait to do it again for episode 2. And now we're going to kick off our first ever highlight of the week. We're going to highlight every episode something that someone's done really well in our community. And this week we have an amazing one that'll be tough to top going forward. But over to you, Emma. Why don't you tell us about this achievement?
Yeah, so we actually have really exciting. Evanie Blondin is a speed skater from Ottawa. She just won gold in their team sprint in Calgary over the past weekend. So that's amazing for her and her team. We're so excited for them. Great job, Evanie, and way to represent Ottawa.
It's incredible. And we should get her on. Wonder if she has a parent coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap on episode 1, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.